Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Sideline Eye podcast. We're very happy to have you for our Ulster Championship preview podcast as we look forward to the Armagh's quarter-final clash with Antrim this weekend. Um, as usual, Paddy Savage is going to give us his thoughts on the upcoming game, and we're delighted to be joined by Jim McCorry and former Antrim goalkeeper Chris Kerr. So it's a big game to look forward to, man. These sides haven't met in the Championship since 2003. Haven't met in the Ulster Championship since 1982. So it's strange that two teams can miss each other so much while they're in the same province. And looking forward to this weekend, it's going to be the first Ulster Championship match in 2 years that is going to have crowds at the game. Although it's still restricted, it's good that there's going to be crowds at it. Paddy, I know you got an email this morning that there's 2 tickets per club in Armagh, which is such a headache for club administrators to sort out. Were you lucky enough to get one?
Okay, I don't know what we're going to have to do. Like, sure, look, you're going to, whatever the odds will be of the people that will put their names forward, and 2 out of however many people you'll have looking for them. It's disappointing, Sean. I mean, I genuinely thought that, we chatted about the 500 for the league matches and we were delighted and we could see that progress. I genuinely thought by the time that we would get as far as the Antrim game, that we'd be looking at something like, 25% of capacity or something, in that area. And I'm sure I'm not the only one who's been watching the Euros over the last couple of weeks with a fair degree of jealousy now. And I mean, nobody's suggesting that we should full stadiums and go back to normal. That's just not the case. That's not realistic. That's not where society is. But I was hopeful that we would be, would have moved on a bit. That you might be looking at 10% of the capacity, 25% of the capacity, or something along those lines. We have so much, now we're in such a better position now than we were, say, last summer. When you were allowed 500 at club games. We have the vaccinations rolled out so far in the north. Literally, any adult can just go and get one. Up in Belfast, and then we also have so much testing. You can order tests. You can take a test yourself, and you have the answer in half an hour before you go to the game. So it just does. It's a bit disappointing, and it rankles a bit. But look. Again, back, I've said it so many times over the last year, but it is great to have the games. Whether you can go or not, and far better this than a blank summer and blank Sundays.
Well, Chris, I suppose you're lucky. You maybe have 2 clubs to go to. You have some goals on the Grange to get tickets off.
And that chance my arm there. It's friggin', there's plenty more can go for it before me. Like, I'll just I don't want to take a risk getting into the ground and both sets of fans trying to have a rattle at me. Like, so.
I suppose for Armagh, the last 2 games were against Southern opposition, Donegal and Roscommon. They had the majority. Armagh had the majority of fans, and you could really notice it. Especially, we talked on the podcast before, especially in the Donegal game, you could really tell that the fans were there. Chris, it's going to be 50-50 this week. Do you expect many Antrim fans to travel? Even maybe fans without tickets could come and sit in a couple of bars around the town or something. Maybe there will be a bit of an atmosphere.
I'd say so. Sean, probably the big thing from an Antrim point of view is just logistically, even, shorter journey. And all that adds up, especially for players. And I'm sure Jim will touch on that, even from a coaching perspective too. A shorter journey and not having to worry about getting off the bus stiff and that as well from a player's point of view as well. But it could go either. It could go either way. The 50-50 split. I agree with what Paddy's saying there. I thought you watch all the other sporting events that are going on around the world and how well we have conducted ourselves throughout the pandemic as a GAA sort of community. There's no reason why it couldn't have been organised that even 10% of the capacity could have been allowed in. But in terms of 50-50, Armagh aren't going to have maybe the pressure of X amount of thousand fans in there as overwhelming favourites. And from an Antrim point of view, if there is so many Armagh fans there, it might not be as hostile. So it can swing both ways, but I'd say the most important people will be the 30 that run across the white line. That'll be the biggie.
And Jim, you were obviously part of the management team last year, and you were involved in the Ulster Championship games that were played behind closed doors. You've been involved for so long on the big day of the Ulster Championship and the big atmosphere that goes with it. What was it like on the line last year, where every score there was maybe a few cheers from the sideline, just from the bench, and there was no big cheers for turnovers or nothing? Was it a miss?
Yeah, post Sean, maybe the first thing I should say before you can answer that is just to say the last time we did this was a preview before Roscommon, and Paddy was kind of not that weekend, and he had big decisions to make. He had a wedding and he had 2 football matches on the same day. He had a club game and the county game, so I don't know which decision he made, but I'm hopeful that he got married, and that was the main one that was taken that weekend. So congratulations, Paddy. And nothing changes after you get married when you're in the GAA, of course. We continue to do what we do, I suppose, and we're very enduring ways.
I'm hoping, Jim, I hope it's right. Is that the first game I got the second half of the club game, we were beating 14 points to 3. So I hope that's not an omen for what way the thing's going to go now. Now that I'm married, I'll be hoping for a. But then Armagh got a decent result. I got to see the end of that game.
Yeah, you can't blame the wife for something like that now, you know.
No.
John, to be honest, I mean, it was so bizarre last year compared to previous non-COVID years being involved in the championship. I mean, there's nothing like the atmosphere in an Ulster Championship day. You know, you get weather like we're having today. You know, this week's been fantastic. You know, you've got sunshine, you have the cut grass, the pitches are immaculate. You know, everybody's out in their colours. You know, it's just fantastic atmosphere. And, you know, everybody feeds off that. Players, you know, supporters feeding off each other's group, cheering, you know, it's fantastic. But last year was so bizarre, it was unreal. I mean, and even if you take it, the Sunday's game, you know, I watched the Down Donegal game, and you can hear the coaches on the line, the calls they're making, you can hear Paddy Tally as clear as day. Even, I mean, I watched that on TV, you hear as clear as day. So it's a completely different atmosphere for players and coaches that, you know, there's so much different type of noise. You know, you don't hear the crowd and you don't hear the misinformation. It's all quite clear. And the one thing that actually was said to me as well, just in terms of Sunday's game, I was talking to some of the Burn players that were involved in Sunday's game against Down, just the communication of Donegal, the calling from the line, the calling from their substitutes, the calling among the players. It was, you know, surreal. They weren't expecting it to be as strong as it was, and it was very powerful playing against them. And I noticed that last year as well in the championship. You know, there's an awful lot of pressure trying to be put on our keeper for the kickouts, and you could hear all the Donegal substitutes, you know, really shouting at the ref, time, you know, and really trying to put, you know, the keeper off for the kickouts. So it's a completely different atmosphere. You know, will 500 make any difference in terms of, you know, the G up for players, that wee bit of inspiration that, you know, you get a big score and you hear the crowd behind you? I don't think it's be a big factor with 500, and I don't think it'll be a big factor today. As Chris rightly says, being such an overwhelming favourite position that Armagh's going into this without having complacency set in. And I'm talking now maybe you from a pundit point of view as opposed to from being a coach, because as a coach obviously you wouldn't be saying something like that, but they really would be so much favourite going into this that, you know, I don't think the crowd would be that big a factor on it.
And Chris, you played in a few Armagh and Antrim games down through the years. I think they've met 4 times in the last 10 years, once in the league and 3 McKenna Cup games. I think you played 3 of them, going back to 2011. That was actually the first match ever played in the newly developed athletic grounds. I know the Dublin game in the league is usually the one thought of, but Antrim beat Armagh that day, Chris. Beat them by a goal, I think it was. And Armagh, the last time they met in 2019, Armagh won quite convincingly. So there's not a whole pile to talk about in terms of a rivalry or recent history between the teams. And as I said, it's strange that they actually don't meet that much. But what was your memories of Armagh and Antrim games, I suppose, when you played?
Yeah, well, I suppose that 2011, I know it was only the McKenna Cup, but it was still for confidence for us getting into the National League that year. It was massive. I mean, I think vague memories of Stevie Mack coming off the bench and stuff, like, and just coming into full forward, me going, oh no, like they're gonna start peppering me here, but I think there was maybe it was a nice moment too, because I think there was maybe 9 or 10 St. Gall's players that started that game, and would won that day. So it was nice to win. Obviously, it was McKenna Cup, but it was still a good win. And then we played in the league in 2017 in the athletic grounds, which was a pretty tight game. I think both teams had a man sent off. And my old mate CJ had a penalty saved. And 9 times out of 10, you're just expecting the net to ripple. I think Armagh maybe won by a point or two that day. And then obviously Armagh have kicked on from then and progressed very well under Ciarán McGuinney. They're up in Division 1. They tend to have very much the same squad throughout the last couple of years and under Ciarán's reign. Whereas Antrim probably over the last load of years, and just something within the county, have a big turnover of players each year. So they're very Armagh would be probably more consistent playing at that higher level, and obviously would be overwhelming favourites getting into this one on Sunday.
They're definitely favourites. Like when you have a Division 1 team come up against a Division 4 team, everybody expects Armagh to win. And I suppose, Jim, not only are Armagh expected, and there probably is pressure that comes with it from their own fan base, they're expected to come through this one and maybe not say expected, but it's hoped that they'll go on and they'll reach their first Ulster final from 2008. And you sort of did touch on it there, like the players probably aren't thinking like that. They've maybe set goals at the start of the year before the draw was even made that they want to get to an Ulster final, but they'll be telling you it's taking a game at a time. They'll respect Antrim, they'll do the correct preparation. But how do you think they'll deal with this expectation that it's just turning up and it's going to be a walkover nearly on Sunday?
It really won't be in the psyche at all, and Ciarán McGuinney won't let that filter at all into it. I mean, you're always hearing coaches in all sports talking about the next game, the one game and taking it one game at a time. And we've heard that ad infinitum with coaches. And that'll be drilled in to Armagh, and it'll be drilled in probably with Ciarán and the rest of the management team, but also with that leaders group. There's a really strong leaders group there that'll just focus the guys on the one game when they're on the field, how they play, what they're set up to do. And then I'll think about who they're going to get in the next round. Will it be Monaghan? Will there be an Ulster final this year? To do so would be really very, very dangerous, because if you think ahead of it and you don't prepare properly for this game, and if Antrim set up, and we know they can score. I mean, they scored 6 goals. I know they had a leaky defence and 7 goals scored against them in their league campaign. I think they ended up with +3 with Larry, like +15 or something like that of the difference on it. So we know they can score, we know they can get goals. Cunningham can come on late, can't come on late and win games for them. I mean, you put that into the context what they scored against the opposition, as opposed to what Armagh were playing against the opposition of Donegal, Tyrone, and Monaghan. You referred to the fact there, Sean, Division 1 against Division 4. So on paper, on the bookies and all the chat, it's all Armagh. But I mean, Antrim this year, the one thing that's impressed me about it, they have new management coming in. Stephen O'Neill in there as well, from the forwards coach, who had an exceptional reputation when he was with Tyrone on it. As a player, he was exceptional as well. So we know they can open up defences on it. And there were problems in Armagh's defence because of injury. I think they really got it right against Roscommon. I thought the team defence was superb. They worked for each other, so they're going to have to be like that. But they're going to meet probably what Armagh have met over this last number of years. Even the time I was there, the first year when we played from Armagh away, we had one man left up and everybody behind the ball, and that is hard to break down. No matter what division you're in, it's hard to break down to try and get those scores. With a bit of time during the game, you start to see things open up. Maybe more scores will happen on it, but to answer your question quite clearly, I mean, the guys will think about this game and how do we break down maybe a blanket defence, how do we get the scores, how do we stop the impetus from the breaks, and having those scores, from the likes of these Wood, guys like that are top scorers for them. So interesting to see, but I certainly don't think Armagh's thinking any more than this weekend.
And Chris, is it likely that Antrim are going to set up like that? Like, I would imagine, having not seen them, this is completely just the fact that it's a Division 4 team coming up against a Division 1 team away from home. I would imagine that they're going to set up quite rigid in their defence, maybe try to get till, say, the 50th minute mark, and then they'll start introducing the game winners such as Cunningham and McCann. And if they're in the game with 20 minutes to go and seeing these substitutes coming on, it could give them a boost to really push on for the last 20 minutes. Is that how you see it panning out from an Antrim perspective?
Definitely. Well, I mean, obviously, you guys are forgetting there, lads. We got up into Division 3 there as well, like, so we're no longer 4. There's only 2 divisions between the teams now, like, so, no, they probably weren't playing that defensive, conceding, as Jim said, there were 7 goals in the games. I think there were, it nearly, as Jim also touched on, about having Stephen O'Neill in there as well as a forward switch. It looked like they were able to go with the firepower they had. And I mean, Antrim are going to be very dangerous on Sunday. I mean, some of the boys, a lot of the Armagh players, although there's not much rivalry really between the counties, it's a lot of the boys went to Queen's, Jordanstown together, played in a lot of teams together, played in the club scenes against each other. So they know each other well, and they respect each other from even just chatting to the Armagh players. They do rate a lot of the Antrim footballers. The 2 Murrays, Mick and Tomas in the forward line there as well. Oren has been stepping up this year as well. Patrick McBride. There's plenty of firepower there, a lot of pace as well. So, as much as probably, this is me looking towards an Armagh side, as much as you're probably going, you're saying all the things, sometimes it can just happen, where you do take your eye off it, not intentionally, it just sort of creeps into the game. And I was sort of thinking about it, from earlier as we were speaking. In all those games, Armagh were probably underdogs in those games in the National League this year, against Tyrone, against Monaghan, Donegal, maybe not so much against Roscommon. So it'll be interesting to see how they take on the overwhelming favourites tag. And, as Antrim have been over the last load of years, they've been underdogs. And, it can be dangerous playing against an underdog, because there's times where we've been wrote off before. Was involved in some big wins against Galway in Casement, 9 points down against Laois in the qualifier, turning from Hanover in Brewster. So I think Antrim definitely do have the firepower, and as Jim will tell you, there's one thing you can't coach, and that's momentum, and they haven't been beat this year, so they'll go into it, quietly confident and nothing to lose. Like,
definitely have momentum coming into Armagh on Sunday in the scene and to begin. Lee sort of spoke about that in the Irish News today, that they have no pressure on, they have no fear coming to Armagh, because they've nothing to lose. Basically, they're going to throw their all at this. Everybody expects them to lose, so they're gonna go all out on it. Paddy, I suppose talking about Antrim's momentum, Armagh have built up a bit of momentum too. While they haven't got 4 wins on the trot like Antrim have, they've built up 4 really good performances, and they've built up a level of consistency that they haven't shown in the last number of years. And I know Chris was talking about the favourites tag there. Armagh probably have been favourites for the first round of the championship for most years now. I know Jim pointed to that 2018 one with Fermanagh. Like, them 2 teams were in the same division, they were in the same league final, and yet Armagh were overwhelming favourites that day and got turned over. Is there a fear of that, Paddy, that you nearly, because Armagh have been so inconsistent maybe for a few years, that you're nearly afraid to build up your expectations of them? Or have they changed this year? Is there a level of consistency now that that they're going to perform at a certain level?
I mean, I think the big concern that you have is Armagh's record in the Ulster Championship over the past even 10 years. Like, there have been some really major disappointments. Like, 2017, massive disappointment, losing that down team in the Marshes. 2018 again, game fully expected to win against Fermanagh, and were well beaten, and deservedly beaten on the day. 19, looked like we were going to hold on and get to an Ulster final, and then Cavan came back at us, got the draw, and went on to win the replay. And then again last year, when we went in against Donegal, hoping to be competitive at least, and we were very well beaten. So yeah, look, that's the trepidation that you have as a supporter. You just knowing that things have not gone well when it came to the Ulster Championship, and all our good championship performances in recent times have come through the qualifiers. And look, you can't do that this year because there's none of them. Have we? But at the same time, I think we have taken a massive step forward this year. All the evidence suggests that. You know, like we spent 3-4 years in Division 3, Division 2. You know, think back to that down match. I think that was when we last played Antrim. That was the year that we got hit by Tipperary, didn't get out of Division 3. We're now an established Division 1 team. We're in Division 1 next year, and we deserve to be there. No doubt about it. We deserve to get promoted last year, and then we stepped up again. You look, when we had our first podcast, Sean, again, what I said, I wanted to see could we be competitive in Division 1. We were more than competitive. We thoroughly deserved to stay up. We were better than Monaghan. We were much better. We won the game convincingly against Roscommon and could easily have gotten through against Donegal and could have gotten a result against Tyrone as well. So the evidence we have so far is that Armagh have taken a step up from where we've been over the last 3-4 years. And if they perform at that level, you expect them to win on Sunday. That's the reality. But if you don't perform at that level, and if that complacency seeps in, you can find yourself in a lot of trouble very quickly. There's the one game that's also comes to my mind, Sean, is that Cavan match that Antrim played last year. Because if you watch that, and I know the scoreline, you know, Cavan maybe pulled away towards the end, but that was a very even game. Antrim missed a lot of chances, and you know they had and we know what Cavan went on to do. At the time, we probably didn't realise how good Cavan were, and that was genuinely a game that Antrim could have won. So you know, if Armagh go in with the wrong attitude, and this is probably the same in the vast majority, you go in with the wrong attitude, you can cut out very, very handily. And it's not, you know, thinking back to that Fermanagh game, if you start, you know, nobody means to go out with the wrong attitude, but if you start and you're a bit flat, very, very hard to change that over the course of the game.
And Jim, like you were involved that day against Fermanagh in 2018 and involved in the Cavan games in 2019 that just didn't get over the line. There was something there that we just couldn't get over the line in 2019. 2018 was obviously very disappointing. I've no doubt from a coaching point of view or a management point of view, there was no level of inconsistency from your point of view. There was no overconfidence that these were going to make it through, get a one over from Fermanagh. Especially I remember the league game that year that it finished 7 each, and it was a desperate game of football that Fermanagh literally lay 15 men behind the ball, and it was all counter-attack and stuff. What has changed, do you think, Jim, or has it changed that much? Is it just maybe that the team has developed this over the last number of years, this level of consistency, and hopefully they can carry it through to Sunday then?
Yeah, I think if you look at those years, I mean, there were different reasons why Armagh didn't progress. It wasn't the same reason each year. It wasn't just that they flopped or, you know, they weren't properly prepared or, you know, for me, if you look at the Fermanagh game, you remember we lost Grimley very early on to straight reds. We were playing with 14 men in Fermanagh. And that was when the two were, as referred to earlier, two Division 3 sides, you know, that were, there wasn't a kick of ball between both really that year. Both were playing really good football. Fermanagh and us both went up. But the loss of Grimley in that game was a major burn on it. And the Cavan game, I mean, that was really so bizarre. High scoring game, great football from both sides. But that game should have been killed in the first game. There should have been a replay. I mean, we had the lead numerous times in that game. We gave it away. We sat back and invited them on, and we had nothing to break the line in terms of passing over the top of the line. And when pressure came on, then it was turned over and they got the scores on it. Should never lost the replay either on it. So that's one where everybody's hand was put up and said we did not perform as a team on it. And that can happen with Antrim on Sunday. That can happen very easily. If you look at Antrim, or if you look at Cavan last year going into the final against Donegal, you know, Donegal for me had that game won, and again missed some easy scores in that last 10 minutes of the game. Cavan, now don't get me wrong, Cavan battled, you know, they fought hard, they got good scores, but the high ball going in and the ball broken out for the keeper, Chris will confirm this, as a keeper doesn't break a ball straight out, he breaks it to the wings, he breaks it to row Z, wherever, that's not going to be any danger. It broke straight through the middle, goal, whole complexion of the game gone completely on it. So that can happen, and they got to be prepared for that, you know, and Antrim can get goals. I said that last time we did the Roscommon game, that Armagh need to stop Roscommon getting goals, because they do get goals on it, and they set up really well defensively to counteract that. Last year's one against Donegal with Armagh, if you take it and you look at it from all perspectives, you look at the video analysis, you look at any proper performance report on that game, it was one period of 8 minutes where Donegal scored about 1-5, 1-6 to no return. Armagh missed a lot of easy scores in that opening period, where at the water break going into 5-3, you'd have been happy. If you're going in 3 points, 2 points down at half time, you'd have been happy. But they got the goal, they got the few points added onto that on it, and it was catch up after that on it. So that was very, very disappointing. I think now that consistency that you referred to, that we've seen in the league, there doesn't seem to be that atmosphere of a perception that, you know, Armagh can get caught on it. I know in the Donegal game they did catch Armagh on it, and I think if Soupy had scored the penalty, and he said this himself against Tyrone, it would have been a completely different result in that game. So they've got to prepare that they don't let stuff like that happen against Antrim. And as Chris rightly says, the whole talks about Armagh everywhere, bookies, everybody's talking about it. We're talking about it here. I'm saying the same, you know. But Antrim are a team more than capable of catching Armagh if they don't set up properly on the day and do what they've been doing in those games, and not what they did and let Donegal back into it or miss key scores like Soupy did in the Tyrone game, because Antrim can steal this game from them in their own backyard.
And Chris, Antrim obviously have a new new management team in this year, and to begin in Stephen O'Neill. Need no introduction to Armagh fans. Obviously, there is always that Tyrone connection. And as I said these earlier, the referee's actually from Tyrone, so maybe he'll do McGinley at Horn on Sunday. What have you seen from the new management team? Like Lenny Harbinson done a good work there the last couple of years on a couple of hard luck stories that they just couldn't get over the line and get promoted. McGinley has come in his first year. Maybe the way it panned out with the regional leagues, it worked out a bit easier for me. He had only 4 games to play rather than 7 to get promoted. But nonetheless, he won all 4. What have you seen from Antrim? Has there been a big change, or has there been any additional players maybe that have come back this year that weren't involved the last number of years?
Yeah, well, I think even, you know, you're saying about the hard luck stories that year under even Frank Fitzsimmons in the Athletic Grounds, we get relegated the following week by a last minute free on scoring difference. So we've been on the receiving end far too many times, and as players, you don't want to be labelled like that either. You know, obviously coming from St. Gall's and what we achieved over the years, like it just wasn't sitting well with Antrim players as well. I think this year as well, I mean, Enda and Stevie were obviously are the joint management, but Sean Kelly from St. Gall's was there, who was a super player, obviously, he's still playing for St. Gall's and Antrim. So he's come in, you know, probably adding more to defensive setup. So straight away there's a lot of respect there straight away for the boys on the line. You know, and I'm sure Stevie and Enda probably didn't want to come up against Mickey and Jared Gavin in the first game in the National League, like, but they got one over in their old master, like. So you know, as I said earlier, you can't beat momentum, and even if it is, you know, nerve-wracking watching those last minute point victories, you know, we've been on the receiving end of so many of them over the years where it's been nearly stories of, you know, we've got beat by that point. So they've instilled that wee bit of belief. You know, the boys are going right to the end, you know, right into the, you know, a couple of times Paddy having to come off the bench there, maybe scoring in the 72nd, 73rd minute to get the points. But you say that, and you know, I'm sure Jim has said it to many a team, and just as he was speaking there, it just reminded me of when Jim was over at Kilcoo against St. Gall's in the Athletic Grounds a long time ago, and you know, the same thing. Just you know, we were probably having a lot of possession, and one ball in, a goal changed the complexion of the game. So this can happen, and obviously Kilcoo have kicked on since then, and you can see what's happened there. But you know, it's all what happens on the day, and I you know, I'm confident that they'll be thereabouts, knocking down there to make the numbers up. As an Antrim fan now, watching the games, you know, watching the draw, you nearly just want straight away to avoid Donegal, Tyrone, Monaghan, and you sort of just want to crack at the rest then, and anything can happen on the day.
And Chris, we've sort of touched on it, like that Antrim have put up a lot of high scores. Jim mentioned they've conceded 7 goals. Is it going to be difficult? We're expecting them to come to Armagh and be hard to break down, while maybe in the league we were having shootouts. I think that it was 3-12 till 3-11 or something against Sligo in the league. Is it going to be difficult for McGinley, who's only new into the job? Maybe isn't sure of his starting 15 yet, isn't sure of his best 15 yet, to change that dynamic, to change the game plan, to have maybe to play with maybe only Ryan Murray and Owen Eastwood up front and everybody else back, or something like that. Is it going to be difficult for him to change his setup now?
It's very hard just because of how condensed the season has been and how little time probably managers had with their players. I think it's very hard just to flick a switch and get, there's a lot of attack-minded Antrim players there to switch on to defensive duties. So it'll be interesting. I think they'll feel each other out for a while. And as you said earlier, very like the Cavan game, if Antrim are thereabouts and are able to bring if Paddy comes off the bench, or Tomas or Michael McCann start or don't start, they've good options this year. There's a lot of depth in the squad. Young Pat Shivers from Corgan, who has been very good for Corgan throughout the last couple of years in the Championship, has a bright future ahead too. So there's options there, and as I said, anything can happen. Like I think they'll have a go. Why not? As you've said earlier, I haven't seen it, but Enda has said that having no pressure now. The Antrim's biggest, and I've always said it, even playing, our biggest thing had to be get out of Division 4 and stay out of it. They've done that, but they just need to stay in Division 3 now, and this is bonus territory, as you've said. Armagh going in with not even just winning the game, but getting to an Ulster final. So, I mean, Antrim have nothing to lose here, and when they're like that, they're a very dangerous opposition.
I think, Paddy, it's going to be important for Armagh to end Antrim's hopes quick. If they can go into the first half water break, maybe 5 or 6 up, go into half time 5 or 6 up, and just don't let Antrim build any momentum. Like if it's tight in at half time, maybe level, or Armagh only a point or 2 up, you're giving Antrim encouragement that they'll come out and win the second half. It's going to be important for Armagh to get a good start, get ahead, and keep there, and don't let Antrim build any momentum or give them any hope.
Yeah, look, that's always what you want to do. And Armagh have been, they've been successful at it at times during the league. Though, look, sometimes a match goes like the Roscommon game, where Roscommon take the early advantage, but Armagh came back. The Monaghan game right back at the start with the exact opposite. But just the one thing that I would say, Sean, and backs up your point, like Antrim are clearly a seriously resilient outfit, because if you look at their results, okay, they beat Waterford, and it was a bit of a lopsided league actually in Division 4. The north section that Antrim were in was a lot stronger probably than the southern section. But like they played Louth, Sligo, and Leitrim. Actually, watching just the last 10 minutes or so of the Louth game, they won all them games by a point. Like if you're playing 3 tight games like that and you're coming out of a 1-point win all 3 times, you're clearly a side that's playing with a bit of confidence and is playing with a bit of belief. And we've already mentioned this. Like it seems like a free shot for Antrim, because there's not a whole pile expected of them. So. Yeah, look, the better start Armagh can make, the easier they'll make it for themselves, because if Antrim are still in the game towards the end, they do have that sort of muscle memory of getting out of those tight situations.
And Jim, just to finish up then, we sort of spoke about after their common game, and it was great to see that Armagh have so many options at the minute. They've real strength and depth. Like against Roscommon, Ryan Kennedy didn't start, James Morgan didn't start, Aidan Falker started, didn't look 100% himself. Yet our defence was brilliant, bar the first quarter was a bit iffy, but brilliant throughout. You had Brendan Donaghy coming in, Andrew Mernon started. You have the young boys like Kieran Kelly has come in this year, Ross McQuillan's back, Kieran O'Hanlon's back. There's so many options at the minute, and it's a good headache, I'm sure, to have for Kieran McGeeney, but it's a headache nonetheless.
Yeah, I mean, that's, I suppose, one of our concerns that we spoke about before the Roscommon game was the amount of injuries that they have. That from midfield up, there's a wealth of talent. You've named quite a few there. That's the new guys coming in. Kieran Kelly. But you take, the way, Rain's been playing, Ocean's been playing, Subi's been playing. Subi came out like with a real vengeance in the Roscommon game, maybe to prove a point on it. Rory Gugan consistent all the time on it. Forker was a massive loss. You take Morgan was injured, Forker was injured, Kennedy was injured. But the heartening thing for me, and I mentioned to you the last time, that to see the likes of McKay coming back. I mean, McKay, he was a player. He was one of the ones who had developed COVID and suffered from it and really had a bad year last year. But he's got his strength back now. He looks fantastic. He's hungry in the tackle. He's supporting the play going out on it. We've seen Greg McCabe back in there, which was great to see that cover on it. McPartins were brought back into the half back line, really strong and drive forward from there as well. Conor Mackin, the work rate of Conor Mackin in that last game and how smart he was in his defence as well. When he was a spur man, but able to double up on the cut-off runs at times as well was great. So considering that, maybe the strength in defence isn't as weak as what we all thought. I don't know what the injury situation is. I assume Parker has a bit more time, will be recovered. You have Kennedy, you have Morgan back in there, plus those guys that we said. Obviously, Paddy's a massive loss to him. Paddy Burns with a hamstring. Soon as the way Paddy will be back in. Stephen Sheridan, a massive loss as well. Would have played in defence, midfield and defence. It was fantastic. Nugent's still out in the forward line. But Merlin came back in. Brandy came back into that game as well as part of that. You have Jason Duffy in there. So there's a lot of strength within the squad. But the bottom line is, Kieran will have these guys preparing to play against Antrim as if they're playing against Donegal in the Ulster final. It'll make no difference that it's perceived third division, Chris, as opposed to fourth division team they're playing. They will be going full out against this team as if it is a Division 1 side they're playing on it. And that's the important bit, that it's all about, again, the old adage you hear from coaches all the time, it's all about the performance. And not think about who they're playing or about the scoreline, about getting the performance right, both defensively, that they need to set up against a very, very strong Antrim attack, but also to utilise this pace and power and great technical ability for getting scores that Armagh has. And that's the way they'll set up on Sunday night.
So that game, it takes place on Sunday at 3:30 in the Athletic Grounds, and it's going to be live on BBC and RT as well, I think. And there's plenty of action this weekend from Armagh. The ladies take on Tyrone in the Ulster semi-final on Friday night, while Armagh under-20s, they take on Donegal on Friday night as well in the first round of the Ulster Championship. The Camogues are in the semi-final of Ulster, and they're playing Cavan on Saturday, while Armagh hurlers take on Tyrone in the first round of the Nicky Rackard Cup on Saturday as well. So best of luck to all Armagh teams taking part in their games this weekend. And once again, lads, thanks very much for coming on and giving us your thoughts on the championship opener this weekend.